Michael Kaskey-Blomain, who writes today at the website the Sixers most likely pursuing Patty Mills, which makes a lot of sense, Michael. I mean, obvious, connect the dots on that one. They go from Mills to Brown in more ways than one.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. That's a good point. I think Patty's a guy, like you said. It's a logical fit, both on and off the court. From he worked with Brett for when Brett was serving as an assistant under Popovich in San Antonio. So there's an obviously previously existing relationship there. Brett has said multiple times, whether it be after games between the Sixers and the Spurs or other times, how he's expressed his affinity for Patty. He said how much he likes him as a person and a player. And then on the court, it would potentially work make some sense as well with if Ben Simmons is going to be playing some of the taking some of the point guard duties. Patty Mills is a guy that can play both on and off the ball, so he could initiate the offense, or if Ben is going to be running the show, he could play off as kind of an off guard that can spread the floor and shoot.
Yeah, he seems like a guy, doesn't create his own shot, but can do we had Kurt Heelan on last hour. He kind of compared him to what Derek Fisher was with Kobe, where Kobe was the creator and drew the attention. That always left Fisher kind of open for these threes, sitting at the top of the key all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be his role if he were to eventually sign with the Sixers this summer. He certainly wouldn't be looked to as, a first, second, or probably even a third offensive option for the team, but it would be much more, like you said, his duties would be in, knocking down open shots when, the attention is drawn to Ben or Joel or whoever it may be, or just serving as that kind of off guard that can, initiate things for others if, a play breaks down.
What's the, obviously very early stages, and you're hearing names. We'll get into some other ones. What's the thought on how much money the Sixers would be willing to spend? Otto Porter's name was brought up yesterday. We talked to Sean Deviney, and he believes that, he could be a max deal, Porter. Are the Sixers going to be looking for guys that are in the max deal range?
See, that's the question. And obviously, the team only has, X amount of dollars, and they've already been linked to, quite a few players early on in this, in the off season. Now, obviously, I don't think any of us are naive. Some of this is obviously, the agents of some of these players using the Sixers as kind of, a form of leverage because this team has, a whole lot of cap space, and they're looking to, use some of that cap space to get better with established veterans. This is, well known. So it's similar to, what we saw some of last year. Some of this is obviously agents kind of playing the Sixers up to, drum up interest in their clients. But, there's certainly money to spend. And I do think, I think others have said this as well, but I think Bryan Colangelo, he's been patient thus far since taking over the team. He hasn't obviously made any, huge splash moves, a couple of, free agency additions and whatnot last offseason. But I do think he's, kind of waiting to put his mark on this team by making a bold move or two, to whether that be via a trade or by adding, a guy that could be looking near max money in free agency. The Sixers can only do so much. They can't, they cannot obviously sign all of these players that they've been linked to already this offseason. But, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if one or two of these guys were, became a reality if the Sixers were willing to spend, a decent amount of money.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain's with us. What's your thoughts on Otto Porter? Any interest there?
Interest, yes, but it's tempered interest. And like you said, I do think that he would probably command close to, if not, basically max value on an open market this offseason. And I don't think that would probably be, the wisest move for the Sixers. I like his skill set, but then again, we're looking at, potentially a couple forwards in the draft at the third spot that would, play a similar role to what Otto Porter would do, whether that be a Josh Jackson or a Tatum if the Sixers went in that direction. Obviously, there's, the Sixers are interested in bringing back Robert Covington. It's another guy. There's just a lot of forwards around, and I don't think that, while Porter's skill set would match with what the Sixers are doing, I don't think it would be the best investment for the money.
Hey, Michael, if you can add one, Porter or Mills, which guy is the better fit?
What's up, Pete? That's a great question, by the way. I think, for the money, I think it would be Patty Mills, just because, well, you would have to invest, a decent amount of money in Mills based off, just the market inflation today. I think you'd be, you wouldn't be necessarily digging yourself into a deep hole as deep a hole for multiple years as you would be with Porter. If you're looking at Porter, you're looking for probably a 4-year commitment around a $20 million a year range, something like that. And that's it's a pretty big chunk of money. Where I think Mills would, while he would still get a decent value on the market, it would be slightly less than that, whether it be 12, 13 a year, something more manageable for the Sixers to handle down the road.
Are there other guys in free agency that you think the Sixers might be interested in?
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. I think there'll be a whole lot of guys that the Sixers will be kind of associated with in the coming month or two. Just off, from what I've heard, they're really doing their due diligence from all avenues, whether it be thinking about potential trades, free agency targets, or what to do with this draft pick. Whether that be moving up, moving down, trading it. Basically, as of right now, the team is really just considering all options from what I'm hearing. I think there's a couple guys that obviously make sense. J.J. Redick is a guy that was reportedly to, get some interest from the Sixers this summer. I think that's a skill set that would make sense. I'm not a big fan of the Kyle Lowry potential signing. I think that would be a kind of a mistake to invest that money in, that aging skill set at this point. But I think shooters, wing guys, whether it be, a Patty Mills, a JJ, or even someone like an Otto Porter, guys that would really complement in both age, on and off the floor skill set and age-wise, the guys that, the Sixers are planning to build around. There'll definitely be some players out there that the Sixers have extreme interest in for sure.
Yeah, Michael, yesterday, talking to Sean Devaney, he said, one of the things that Otto Porter fits is the youth. They want to find younger guys. They want to get younger free agent level type of players. He kind of disagrees with the reports about Kyle Lowry because he feels that he's in the wrong place of his career. So those younger guys that are coming off their rookie deals are seemingly the kind of guys that you could maybe connect some dots with to Philadelphia.
Exactly. I think that is a big sticking point. That's a great point by Sean, which is kind of one of the main reasons I would be opposed to the Kyle Lowry signing. At 31, he's almost a decade older than, most of the Sixers core guys, Embiid and Simmons. In a couple years difference, it's not a big deal. And they want that, I think, some veteran leadership. But like you said, I think some guys that are, more so in that same age bracket as the Simmons and the Embiid and the Dario that can really kind of gel and build together going forward, which is why I think, a guy like, Otto Porter or someone that would make sense coming off of that deal, other players like that are, unfortunately for the Sixers, those are the guys that are going to be probably looking to get a lot of money on their second contract. So that's a little bit difficult. But I do think that age will be, a factor in what moves the Sixers make, as in at least in terms of max deals.
Hey, give me your thoughts on a guy like Gordon Hayward and whether or not he would be a fit, or is he a guy like, that the Sixers could lure here? I mean, because it seems that they're in a very unique spot in the NBA. Most times free agents, we see Durant, we've seen it with most of the top-level guys, they go where they think they can win. Very rarely do you see a guy go to a team that's an up-and-coming team. They wait till that team is on the way up and needs the one final piece. But do teams look at the Sixers maybe a little uniquely different than they would have teams in the past, as we're not going to wait for you to get to the up. We already believe that you have the talent to get there. You just need that extra piece, and I can be that guy.
Yeah, that is, like you said, I think that's a pretty unique situation that the Sixers are in, whereas a lot of the fans were kind of looking to see, like, the future of the team, like, oh, this team could develop into something. Like you said, I think players see that too, especially after last season, during the month of January, where the Sixers were beating teams, respectable playoff teams, and kind of showed a glimpse of what they could really be with, a healthy Embiid and then, some solid players around him. So I think that seed has definitely been planted in players' minds. Now, whether or not it would be, this summer that would really be reflected in potential interest in players, or next summer, would yet to be seen. But I do think, it really only takes one guy, whether, like you said, a Gordon Hayward, or whether it would be, somebody else that would hit the market to say, I think me pairing with these young guys would be enough to put this team, over the top and turn it into a perennial contender. In a situation like that, it doesn't often come around. Like you stated, it's usually a team is kind of already set. But I think the Sixers are uniquely positioned to take, a pretty big jump forward this year and in the future years. And I think, players, if they haven't already kind of noticed that, they will certainly, take that into account in free agency moving forward.
Do you like Hayward? Is he a guy you'd be willing to spend the money on?
Yeah, actually, skill set wise and age wise, I think he would be a great fit. I don't think he would potentially be interested in coming here this summer, whether or not you go to Boston, as there's some rumors, or stay in Utah. But I mean, the money does need to be spent at some point, and that's a guy and a skill set that I think would fit really well. Next to Simmons and Embiid and those other guys, is kind of the prototypical wing in today's NBA. He's really worked to develop himself since coming out of Butler. He's gotten much better on defense, and he's kind of expanded his offensive game to the point that he's a real threat going to the basket too, not just shooting. So I do think that would be I'm not necessarily advocating that they do that, but if that did come down the pipeline and they ended up signing him, I think that would be, there would be much worse ways to spend that money.
Hey, Michael, we hear so much about Embiid and Simmons coming back healthy, but what about Jerryd Bayless? What does he add if he comes back healthy?
That's a great question, Pete, and that was also a question that I kind of had with the the Patty Mills rumor report that I was told recently yesterday. It seems as though he would almost fill a similar role to kind of what they would be looking for in Patty Mills, and a guy that is capable of both playing on the ball as a point guard and initiating the offense and setting up others, but also is equally as comfortable as flipping it and playing off ball on the wing while Ben Simmons brings the ball up and initiates the offense and drives to the basket, and can kind of operate as a catch and shoot type player in that respect. He obviously did not get to show much of anything for the Sixers last year, but he was a guy that I know that they were, Bryan Colangelo specifically, was pretty high on bringing in. And, I think he would have started for the team last year next to Ben Simmons. And then there's a chance that they could go that route again this year with him as, the starting point guard next to Ben. But, I do think they expect him to be a guy that's going to produce for them and kind of play that off-guard ball roll, dual threat kind of point shooting guard type role next to Ben Simmons with the, while they try him out as the team's point guard of the future.
Yeah, I think Bayless was a very underrated addition last year, and
just didn't see enough of the wrist injury and all that. I mean, you really didn't see much of him.
Well, the 2 games that he really was a part of, I think they won at least one of the 2.
And then one of them, he was really playing hurt.
Yeah, and then he got hurt, and then he tried to play again the next night and just didn't have it. But in just a few games or a few minutes, you could say, he really showed, he added something that this team lacks, a shooter, and he would really be an extra ball handler, which I think a guy like him, Michael, allows them to really go forward with Ben Simmons playing the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was, a lot of their idea when bringing him in. A guy like that doesn't need to, he's a point guard by name and he's played point guard in the past, but you put him in the lineup and you can completely really let Ben Simmons run that offense, and then you still have another guy that's there waiting in the wings that can operate as a guy. Bayless is capable. He's where he can take it to the rim. He's a pretty good finisher and he has some bounce. There's been quite a few times where he's finished at the rim with a dunk on plays that I just did not expect him to be able to finish on. So that combined with his his ability to shoot from long range, he's been a pretty solid career 3-point shooter. I think makes him a really perfect fit next to a guy like Simmons, especially in the early stages where you're trying to figure out exactly how Simmons will operate at the point position. Having a safety net like Bayless in there, or Patty Mills, something like that, I think that would not only help Ben personally, mentally on the floor, and knowing that there's somebody else that could help the offense, but it would also just make things run much more smoothly.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain's with us. Read his piece at 973ESPN.com. Sixers expected to pursue Patty Mills in free agency. And as we kind of open this conversation up with, Brett Brown, Australia, Patty Mills, Spurs, there's a lot of dots that can draw Patty Mills to Philadelphia, and you wonder if he's a guy that Bryan Colangelo, it was funny. We had Kurt Heelan on last hour, and he said, the only thing I worry about is if Bryan Colangelo kind of loses patience and tries to go get these mid-level guys and start plugging them in, and that kind of, bogs them down a little bit. Would you put Patty Mills in that category?
Yeah, I think that's fair to put him in that category. It's definitely interesting, their interest in him, considering, Bayless obviously on the team already. It does seem like that would be somewhat of a duplicate role right there.
Yeah, I agree with that the 2 guys would be both kind of combo guard, help Ben Simmons out type of players.
Right, which is, exactly what the Sixers need, but at the same time, they don't need, multiple of those players. So if they were to pursue Patty, it would be interesting to see what that meant for, Jerryd's role on the team next season.
When we had Colangelo on last week, he's seemingly putting a lot of eggs, which is good to hear, in the Embiid Simmons basket. But he did say, we always talk about what if, and now we got some clarity going into this season. We have two healthy bodies in Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, and we know that Jerryd Bayless is like having a free agent signee even before free agent open. So sounds as if he's pretty confident in Embiid and Simmons being ready and being 100% healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard him on the show last week. It does sound as though, he is confident, and everything I've heard from the team is that there's, basically complete confidence in the process, excuse the process, but both of those guys' recovery at this point. I think everything I've heard about Ben is that he is, basically just ready to go at this point. He has been a frequenter at the training complex out in Camden. He's there, from what I've been told, almost, basically every day putting in work, and he looks, fantastic. I think he's probably itching at the bone at this point to, just get out there and play some real basketball. And the same with, from everything I've heard about Joel, the information's been a little bit more scarce regarding him, but it seems as though everything, all the news coming out of the post-surgery with him has been, solid and on track. So I do think that as much as you can be confident, obviously, regarding a guy that's had such serious, consistent injury issues over the past few years, I think that there is still a pretty good feeling, within the organization about him and his health and his status moving forward.
So, Michael, the Sixers won 28 games last year, 18 more than the previous season. They did it with just 31 games of Embiid, 0 games of Simmons, 3 games of Bayless. Colangelo admitted that. He was open about that. He said even with Joel playing the way he did, minutes restriction, he gets hurt. Saying all of that, we still won 28 games and had an 18-game improvement. So they're wearing that kind of like a badge of honor. Like, hey, we improved by 18 games and only had 31 games of this kid, 0 of the other kid, and 3 of another guy. So I guess the question really comes, how many games is having a full Embiid, a full Simmons, a full Bayless together, plus whoever they add in this year's draft and free agency? How many games is that worth?
I mean, that's the question. I think it's definitely hard to put an exact number on, but, I think that's another 10 wins easily right there. It's hard to shoot up much past. You have a team that already improved 18 games in 1 year, another 10 games upon that. That's, 28 games in a 2-year span is pretty much, a pretty good improvement number right there. But, at this early point, obviously the roster still has a ton of shaking out to do, but just based off, those 3 guys, what you said, if you add those to the lineup that you had last year, I think you're looking at least a 500 team, a 40, 41, 42 win team, and, definitely a playoff team in the East. And that's before you add another draft pick this year, before you, take into account another year for Dario, under his belt. He obviously seemed much more comfortable in the second half of the season compared to the first. So I think that we'll see a pretty big jump in the level of play from Dario Saric this year too. You got to factor that in. Just the level of comfortability between these players that really never played together before last year now kind of gelling. I just think that there's, a whole lot of reasons to think that the Sixers, final record will be, much drastically improved over what it was last season, at least to the point of, a potentially 500 team.
You like the sound of that, PT?
I like the, hey, they're second place in something, Mike Gill and Michael Kaskey-Blomain. There's a new thing out that says the Sixers have the second best Twitter account in the entire NBA.
That's very important for wins and losses. Got to have that. Speaking of Twitter accounts, follow Michael Kaskey-Blomain at The Real Mike KB and check out his piece on the Sixers and Patty Mills over at 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, man, we'll be talking.
Thanks, fellas.